Welcome to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and I help deeply caring equestrians create emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. This podcast is a safe place for anyone who desires a better future for horses and for the equestrian lifestyle. I hope that you will enjoy these solo and collaborative episodes where we enjoy a deep insight into our horses' worlds and ways in which we can make that better for them. If you love horses and are willing to do right by them, you're going to love this podcast. And I thank you for being here. Michelle Knapp is a lifelong horsewoman currently living in Wisconsin. Michelle has so much experience, and I'm humbled to know her. Not only just experience in one aspect of having horses in her life, but in so many, including, but not limited to, the Arabian show world, ranching and cattle work, showing gaited horses, reining, colt starting, driving, eventing, long-distance mountain trekking, dressage, both competing and judging. She was also a professional within the Parelli organization as a trainer, and so much more. You name it, she's tried it. Today, Michelle Knapp runs Knapp Horsemanship and Livery out of her farm in Wisconsin. And Michelle has become my friend and colleague, and I kind of feel really cool about that. I'm also proud to announce that even since our recording, Michelle and I have decided to partner together to become the first affiliated emotional horsemanship instructor, coach, and trainer within these methods. She is familiar with emotional horsemanship. She says it feels like home to her. And we are linking arms together so that she can continue to help me support my students on their learning journey, and so that I'm not so alone in my work. I am proud that such an experienced and fabulous horsewoman such as Michelle has chosen to partner with me. I feel so seen by her and so proud to know her. Also, she has a wonderful sense of humor and almost became a stand-up comic at one point. I look forward to presenting her here on the podcast, not for the first time. Michelle Knapp, good morning.
Good morning, Lockie.
How you doing?
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. It's really fun.
I'm so excited that you are here too. I dragged you out from under a Wisconsin rock, and I'm here putting some spotlight on you, whether you like it or not.
I really like my Wisconsin rock. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah, I think we all deserve to have like a nice quiet rock to live under. I don't know if we all deserve a Wisconsin rock, the land of serial killers and cheese, but like I hope you're safe out there and that the dairy's good. Your cholesterol's all right.
Now, also just to counter that, I think there was just an article that came out in some major publication that Madison, which is just like half an hour north of me, is like the number 3 best place to live of like happiest cities in the US. So
no kidding.
Yeah, so just cool it with your serial killer stuff there.
I have a penchant for true crime documentaries, and you know, whatever Netflix tells me, I swallow like some kind of middle class white girl. So there I am.
Yeah, it's understandable. It's a colorful state for sure, but also not as many rocks as where I came from, which is Arizona. So, we have grass, which is much better for horses to have some grass with their rocks. That's helpful.
So it's like a mossy rock, a mossy Wisconsin rock.
So comfy.
Mossy grass. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, for anyone who doesn't know you, who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it?
Oh, that's all? Yeah. Be back under my rock. Thanks. So I am me. Here I am. This is me. I basically now spend most of my time helping people with their horses and tending to my little herd of horses here at my farm. That's one of my big passions, is creating horse-friendly environments for my horses to live in, partly to be an example, but partly because it just became sort of the most important thing in any training or horse educating that I was doing. So I spend a lot of time under my rock, on my farm, taking care of and observing our two herds. We have two herds, one that is made up of the horses that are owned by me and my family, and then the other, we have 5 boarded horses. So watching them, that's pretty much who I am and what I do. Well, I would say what I do maybe is a little more trying to take what I'm observing and turning that into something helpful for humans in their interactions with their horses.
So before you were living where you are now on your farm in Wisconsin, what was your life like as a horsewoman, and for how long have you been in this game?
A long time. Another good question. So, I mean, we have pictures. Like, I don't come from a horsey family. I brought horses into my family. We have pictures of when I was like little tiny infant person reaching over to meet. My parents used to walk me around the neighborhood, and there was an old polo farm like way far away. And I would want to go and pet the horses even as a tiny child, and would drag them on weekends to go and try and find horses. So I've been loving horses since probably the womb or shortly thereafter. As soon as I came earthside, I was like, hey, horses, you and I, we've got a thing. So it's basically, that's been all I have done as a professional career. But it started as a kid just calling barns when I lived in Southern Arizona, and Arabian shows are everything, or they were in the 1980s and 1990s. They were a really big deal. So I called barns like, hi, I'm 12. Can I come and work at your barn? And most everybody said, no, you're 12, because it isn't the Midwest. That's pretty common in the Midwest, but in Arizona, it was not. Until finally I found a barn that said, oh, sure, why don't you come and clean many, many, many stalls for us, and we will let you play with our show horses. So that was how I got started, and actually worked 6 days a week all summer when I was 13 to pay off like essentially a deposit on my first horse. And my parents said, okay, yeah, if you're that horse crazy, we'll match whatever you earn. And that was how I bought my first horse at 13, who was a 4-year-old Arabian mare.
Was she started under saddle yet at 4?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Barely. Yeah. And I was. She was amazing. She was truly amazing. But yeah, it turned out that was a really fantastic experience for learning how the equine industry is set up to help children and young adults gain lots of work experience.
I'm hearing a very diplomatic answer. What's hidden there? What's the hidden truth there that you're imparting about that experience?
Yeah, that was just the beginning. And those guys, they were, I mean this in the nicest of ways, completely ignorant really about how the horse industry worked. They were people that were kind of thrown in haphazardly. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting culture behind that sort of, later it can be called working student, right? Which can have some really good value, but can also have some potential for conditioning, some exploitation.
exploitation, something, low-key child labor, something unregulated, perhaps inappropriate or lack of supervision of minors in adult environments. This is a problematic underbelly of the equestrian industry, where a lot of people get their start and cut their teeth that way. In my own way, I did too. It's almost like the volunteering phenomenon, which is an extremely interesting and at times quite dark industry. I don't know of almost any equestrian hotspot that doesn't benefit off free or close to free minor, child, and sometimes even adult labor. And everything from their pricing system down through to their accounting processes, down through to their business structure, kind of relies upon this very willing and low-cost labor. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely, yes. And I experienced it in the Arabian show industry for several years. And then to a lesser extent up through dressage barns and in natural horsemanship and sorts of places as well. It's definitely prevalent. And I think it has a real place and benefit in one regard, because there are so many people who are dying for the experience, and the only currency they have is their labor. They don't have the money, right? You're completely unfamiliar with that concept right now. No.
I have no idea what the currency of my physical... I'm totally with you. My whole start into horses was that. I would say I don't have money, but I can give whatever time I've got and whatever labor I've got. And some of the early places I used to volunteer at, I was like sweeping the roof like a crazy person. Like they would walk in and they'd say, "Wow, this place looks really good." They're like, "Lockie's here." Lockie showed up and I'm in a corner like scrubbing a roof like a maniac, you know. But I've had people write to me, very nice people, sometimes super qualified people, say, "Let me volunteer with you. I want to learn from you. Let me volunteer. I'll scrub the walls. I'll muck out." And I always say, "Thank you, but that's not my point of view. I'd bring you if I could offer you a fair wage and or exchange," because often these volunteering positions, though you're working all the crappy jobs, we as volunteers have an expectation that we're going to get something from it. If it isn't money, we're going to get access to horses. And I can't always promise that. So I can't really take in volunteers because I struggle to get the time to get myself in front of my horses for my own work. I don't have time to be putting other people in front of my horses. So, but is that how you entered, right? So exchanging your labor to get access. How much access did you get to training, focused training as a child?
It was so interesting and kind of different because, again, that first barn that I was at when I was, let's say, 12 to 14, one of our great family stories is somewhere in that 13-year-old range when I came home and I was like, "Mom, what does money laundering mean?" Because we lived in southern Arizona. We were about an hour north of the border with Mexico. And
oh boy.
Yeah, it was great. So that's not a bad thing. But the interesting part is this barn that I was a part of, they had roughly 4 employees and there were probably 150 horses. And this was at the point where the Arabian show world, like you could still get great tax shelters from buying purebred Arabian horses in the 1980s. Some of these stallions were $1 million stallions. And some of the horses that they would just go, the owners would go and buy, 3 horses for $100,000 each on a weekend. As I'm older, I realized that's really not normal.
No, and that's not normal.
Yeah, the owners lived out of state, but they had these huge this huge farm. And at one point, there was an odd couple that came to look at a couple of horses. They were there 4 or 5 days and they'd show up. And I remember thinking, there's something so off about these two. It's just off. Yeah. They were from the FBI. It was a sting operation. No joke. No joke.
Wow.
Yeah. So part of that 2 years that I was with that barn involved the U.S. Marshals coming and seizing all of the horses and equipment that was still there, because there had been like a 6-month period when the owners and the employees knew that they were going to get shut down, that things just started disappearing. Horses would end up in different locations. Equipment was going all over. So it was a real introduction into the horse industry at a young age. But at that barn, I had access to being a trainer knowing nothing. So I would have a string of horses to work and a string of stalls to clean. And occasionally would get lessons from people who probably didn't know a whole lot, but were kind. And, that was not a horrible experience in terms of people treatment. But then I went to another barn, which was absolutely an amazing study in what not to do. So there was a trainer who very much, I think, started out loving horses, absolutely, but then became pretty drunk on her own power over horses and people, essentially. And she probably had 50 horses, we'll say. And I was her assistant trainer for a year and a half or so. And I was in high school. And that basically entailed me showing up at the barn after school and organizing which of the other, I think there were usually about 4 of us, other high school girls would work which horses that afternoon and how many stalls we'd clean. And we would kind of earn our lessons or time riding our own horses under supervision. So that was fantastic in terms of, again, being slowly conditioned to just shut up and do the things.
Do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work.
Yeah. And I realized now, we were high school kids training these horses for the trainer who was getting paid a lot to train those horses. And we were also cleaning the stalls, and we were also doing the stuff, like we weren't doing some of the work like ordering shavings or ordering feed, but yeah, it was a pretty interesting endeavor for sure. So that was a back.
I'm hearing that there's a line here that in these 2 different places, that corruption at some level was just like the paint on the walls or like the muck pit in the corner. It was just an element of being in these environments. And I think that's something that is not really spoken about in the open enough, because if we think about equestrian environments, big ones, ones with facilities and the machinery and the buildings and the indoor arenas and the footings and the fencing, these are multi-million-dollar facilities. Who constructed that? Who had the money to do that? Because, throw a dart on a map, find the local equestrian professional. They're not millionaires. And yet we've got dozens, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of multi-million-dollar facilities all over the world, which are, horses as a central theme, the same way the Met Gala picks a different theme every year for their dresses. It's not like that the theme is the thing. It's just like horses are a theme and we have this facility. It's, kind of like a human pageantry thing. And it's curious for me because the people in power are usually the people who aren't the people at the grindstone or the coalface or actually dealing with the horses. The people who know about horses, the grooms, the handlers, the trainers, the stable people, they don't have power. They don't have agency because they don't have the money. They're not holding the purse strings. And often, I think it's been true that a lot of these facilities are essentially constructed as tax-deductible expenses or as a way to hide ill-gotten gains from the government, put it into a facility that then they can, have a legitimate business on the surface with, but the way they got that, and I think this is largely how a lot of these big facilities are put together, and I don't think that's spoken about enough. So let me just put that card on the table, that a lot of these places, honesty and integrity, it's hard to find sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially like you're saying, the really high dollar facilities. And that's not to say all of them, but certainly it's
not
prevalent. It's a prevalent thing. I've definitely seen both sides because I've been showing was my life for probably 15 years, from young adult through my 20s, because I moved from the Arabian world into dressage and had an amazing support. So as crazy and weird and semi-abusive as that beginning whole section of my horse industry exposure was, that's how wonderful the next phase on the other side was. Amazingly supportive dressage group in Southern Arizona, where I was so lucky to get to be part of a group where people truly, accepted you for who you were, and the horses and the students, everyone was supportive and more collaborative than exclusive. So that was, just hugely different. I have such great memories of that. And it was just a whole different, that was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was like the early 2000s. And
I was barely out of my diapers then. You're like, let me reach through the screen and slap that sentence off your face.
I earned all these gray hairs. I am not ashamed of them at all. They have so many stories behind them. Not a problem. I cry a little, but not a lot. But so then it was such a different, the way that the barns were run was completely different. The way that the structure was inherently different. Instructors were working with other instructors, right? So in a breed show world, it's sort of has the feel of, these are my students, you are my clients, and you have to stay with me as the trainer, or something bad will happen if you go over there, because it's all based on keeping and retaining, and like, oh, I don't have the answers, but I have to pretend like I have the answers, as a trainer. And in the dressage world, at least it was much more of a structure of, we need to take lessons with people who have more knowledge than us. And that's inherently built into the structure of, I'm working on training in first and second level, and I need to take lessons with someone so that I can learn about third and fourth level and the upper levels. And, this person's learning about this, but they're taking lessons with someone that's an international judge. And there's just a much different feel there to begin with.
Hold the phone. Am I hearing you correctly that you were 15 years in a competitive dressage environment, and this was a positive and supportive environment for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's not the story I typically hear.
I know.
So I'm curious. I want to lean into that. Tell me the anatomy of that. I mean, you just started, but tell us more about the anatomy of this positive story from that world, and also, why are you not still there if it was positive?
Oh, that's such a good question. So one of the interesting things about it, right, it was in Southern Arizona, which is sort of can borrow from in the time of the late 90s and early 2000s. You got to remember, YouTube and Instagram and social media and all of that isn't the flavor. People aren't getting they're not getting information with the same rapidity that they are now. So it was almost like not like a Wild West cowboying, but a little bit. So it was partly because I think at that point, dressage was just coming into the era of, seeing essentially, that was when Isabel Worth and Ankie Van Grunsven, right? We had the bonfire and I forgot his name now. But anyway, that sort of leg movers are just becoming a known thing more globally.
So this is when it was beginning.
It probably was beginning before then. It's when it became part of a big public discourse. So our little area, we had people that were competitive, but we weren't Southern California, which was a few hours away. We weren't in Florida. We weren't in the hot spots of churning out Olympic.
Hundreds of horses a year.
Yeah. And I think there's a very robust community in that area where there had been some pioneers that started dressage and combined training in the area, and they were still sort of active and shepherding that into being, I guess. And they really cared about the horses and the people. And I think that was a big part of it.
Oh my God. Are you almost saying that like communities led by benevolent pioneering leaders are also healthy communities where there's a trickle-down effect right into every corner where everyone can benefit from these healthy, benevolent, in it for the horse leaders? Oh my God. Is that what you're saying, Michelle?
It sure could be.
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? That this stuff we're screaming into the wind about, that you've lived that and you've seen that and you've seen that be real. Wow. Okay,
absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. And so many of these people were on non-traditional breeds, like Arabians and thoroughbreds. And the amazing instructor that I was working with at the time, her name is Ellie Stein-Masick, and she's still around. And she introduced the idea of Parelli to me and others in the area in the 1990s when it was little sheets of paper. Okay?
Wow.
There were a couple of DVDs. I'm sorry, not DVDs. Dear God. VHS. Yeah. And pieces of paper and cowboys who were out using that sort of horsemanship literally out in the hills. And that's where I became introduced to it, as I apprenticed with her. And her husband worked on a 30,000 acre cattle ranch. And in the summer, I would go down and live with them and learn about ranch life and how to apply these things, and then go out teaching with her, because she's now, I think, an S-level dressage judge. And that was just an amazing experience and an introduction to a whole different way of being. But so there were people in that group that were open to more alternative mindsets, which is, of course, helpful as well.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So the stuff that I've suspected has been true, that the competitive world hasn't always been this wackadoodle. You're saying that, at least from your lived experience, that was the case, that your dressage community was led by someone who was learned and interested and curious to reach into communities outside of her wheelhouse to bring in other elements, to bring in people who aren't necessarily competing dressage, to learn about horses and improve practices, and using a variety of breeds, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was more than her, but she was an athlete. And that was a huge, when we would be at shows, trainers would talk and there was camaraderie, and, we'd get coffee for each other and support each other. It was very, very much more collaborative than not.
Okay.
So many people.
So why did you leave that environment or move on from that environment?
It was still competition. It was still So what drove me to leave was, not shockingly, a big warm blood. He was sort of the catalyst, I would say. So it's still, that was a lovely environment in so many ways. But for me, I got burned out on competition. Personally, I got burned out on the needing to get things done, or, feeling that internal pressure to push through and push past what was comfortable and best for the horse. So I was bumping up against all of that, and this was the first warm blood I owned. So I had Arabians, and mostly I'd been showing my Morgan Arabian cross. I showed him for years and had, client horses as well. But then I got this beautiful, just dreamy Selle Francais cross, and started showing him in training level and just the beginning levels. I mean, this is a horse that he was a 9 mover all across his case. He was just phenomenal. But had real trauma in his background. Now, I know how much these things can affect. His mom had died. His owner was really angry with him for having survived. And it was a whole thing. But point being, the pressure that I was putting on him, although I thought it was very balanced and helpful at the time, was causing him to be essentially any show that we'd go to, he'd get a respiratory infection afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah, I would leave at the show, and at the point right before I stopped, I probably showed him for a year and a half or so, and we would either get like high point of the show, or we'd be eliminated. Those were the two
options.
Yeah, those were the two options. And I started to feel really good about what I was able to show and how put together we looked and athletic, and people would gather to watch our tests. I was like, yeah. And I think that's probably because they were like curious if he was going to stand up and spin, the giant 7 horse.
It's like
tiny 5.
Watching Formula One. It's like watching Formula One Grand Prix. It's like, when is there going to be a catastrophic fail?
Which one is it going to be? Like, is it going to be the 75% ride or the 45% where he stands up and flies around and she holds on and wow. We never left the arena. I never got bucked off. There was nothing like that. But there were fantastic feats of athleticism. And I actually did receive 1 mark of 10 with him. And that's the only one I've ever received, which was amazing. But
what was his name?
Judo. He is the first and only horse of my own that I ever sold. And it was a huge lesson for me. I was very, very, I should say I rehomed him very carefully. He was someone I was offered, I think, so at the time, that would have been like 2003, I was offered $65,000 for him.
Excuse me?
Yeah. More than once, I was offered 40 plus for him. He was
Whoa.
Just unreal, gorgeous. He had a neck to die for. But I knew in my gut that these people wanted to show him. And I could tell even at that point, like, that's going to kill him. This is not going well. He needs to learn how to horse. He needs to be a horse. This isn't working. So eventually I kind of went searching and contacted Karen Rolfe of Dressage Naturally. And he ended up going to who was one of her working students at the time. Well, she took him for a little while because she was like, yeah, I'd be interested. Because I did not want him to go to someone that would just see him as
brutalize him.
Yeah. So that was a huge lesson for me because I had still thought at that point, I can be the perfect home for any horse because I just love them enough. And I was like, wow, I don't have a setup. I tried for years and it did not work out. And so I found him an amazing.
So what did your setup look like at that time when Judo was there, circa 2003? Southern Arizona, you're competing, you're in that world. There were many, many positives, but I'm reading between the lines that there were still practices that were kind of pushing horses into situations that they may or may not have consented to, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People too. So what was your actual horsekeeping setup looking like at that time?
So my mom and I shared a little 3-acre property. And we had essentially what the common horse housing in Southern Arizona is called a mare motel. So it's essentially covered pens with some runs. So that was what he lived in. And I actually boarded him at another facility, which was basically the same because they had a bigger, better arena set up. But essentially it was probably like a 24-foot by 36-foot, let's say, covered outdoor pen. And
so training was his only real physical freedom. But even then it was like, we need to put you in this modality of what we're going to compete with.
Well, I had a lot of other, we did a lot of free movement and he's the one that led me to start exploring Parelli.
Liberty.
Yeah. Yeah. And saying, okay, because he basically put it to me that if we keep going down this road, one of us will die. And I don't care which one at this point. I just can't take any more of this.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember at one point I watched him when he
Hold up.
trained.
I'm so sorry. I'm hypnotized by your story, but you had an awareness from Judo. You had an awareness from this horse where he shared with you either, who knows how, where he kind of said, one of us is going to die if we don't change something, but I cannot continue without change.
Mm-hmm.
How did that awareness come to you? And what was that moment like when you had that realization?
Oh, it was horrible. It was like I wanted to grow up, right? Because now, I mean, we're talking about months of push through, because I was still very good at pushing through, my own boundaries of saying, ooh, maybe that's not right. So I'd stuffed a lot of that. So it was repeated. That's uncomfortable, but I can rally. That doesn't feel right from him, but I can rally. Ooh, he's really struggling, but I can rally. So at the point where it was the last show where I went, I've scratched 3 of the 4 tests that I signed up for because I know he's not okay. What am I doing? Like, why am I not listening? And then when I realized, it was my ego at that point going, oh, but look, I've gotten these giant high point trophies. I'm getting statewide recognition and people coming up going, wow, you finally have a horse that matches your caliber kind of thing. Yes, I do.
Yikes.
Oh, shoot. But I'm kind of killing him. That was a hard realization. But it was an intuitive one. So it was a recognizing the intuitive information I had been blocking. That's why it felt so yucky.
Okay. Did that happen? All right. I want to understand this because maybe there in the tens of people listening to this podcast, there'll be one who might have one foot in one world and another foot in a world of burgeoning realization. For you, was this a sudden, I'm going to have some yes, no answers.
Okay.
For you, was this a sudden realization? Yes or no?
Yes.
It was a sudden. So it was sort of like in one day, it was like, oh my God. Ugh. Correct? Okay. But if looking back in retrospect, was there a build-up period? Was there like 6 weeks, 3 months prior where it was like increasing? Okay. Was it in the lead up to a specific show, or what was the anatomy of that?
It's really hard to think back through that with that filter. I'm not certain because there was a pattern of glossing over that information that my body was trying to give me.
Glossing over information that your body was trying to give you right there. And then one day you couldn't gloss over it.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the sudden part of it, is going, the realization that I had been knowing that all along. That was the painful part.
Wow. Did Judo change towards you after that realization? Did you notice at that time any discernible difference in his demeanor towards you?
It's a really good question. And again, the filters are hard to look back at. That was 20 years ago, literally.
Right.
20 years ago. And what I did notice is after each show, when the next time I would go out to the barn that next morning, he wouldn't want to be caught in his pen. So that part changed. But he was so out of his body. By the time, I brought him home and he was next to one of our horses and he would start weaving. I mean, he did so many dissociating behaviors. He would start weaving and our one horse would reach up and grab the skin on his shoulder and snap it as he was weaving. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. And that snapped him out. I mean, his ability to dissociate was top level.
So when he was dissociating, perhaps you were too, in your own way, two disassociated beings running towards a conclusion together.
What could go wrong?
Oh, Well, well, you ended up moving him on, it sounds like, it couldn't have been a more ideal rehoming situation.
Yes, because I knew at that point what he needed was a big area with other horses. He needed to go get turned out in a field and have the support of other horses. He needed a herd, and he needed grazing, and he needed to go learn how to be a horse and have someone that could understand his amazingness without necessarily needing the validation that his physical body looked like it could provide.
Wow. Okay.
So he did end up with that. Which huge. It was huge. Yeah.
So 20 years ago, do you know what happened to him? Is he still around? Did he?
No, he has passed now. But yeah, I remained Facebook friends with the person that bought him. And it was kind of a complicated journey. It's not like it definitely helped. He was able to go and live in a pasture with other horses. And she was able to do some stuff with him. And it's wonderful. And that was really, it was huge in so many ways. Know that, again, that letting go of finding that little chunk of ego and thinking, well, but I know I can provide the best home for everybody, any horse that I want, and realizing, oh, yeah,
I can't.
Watch the ego there, maybe not. Maybe you can't provide here in your 3 acres of Southern Arizona a big pasture turnout. And I knew I didn't have the tools necessary at that point to help him. I had tried and tried and tried and just did not. But I learned a ton from him, and I hopefully did do right by him. So that was a good lesson.
Oh, bless you, Judo, for the lessons that shape us and move us. I mean, all of us. The longer we get into this, the more likelihood we will be presented with that horse that changed us. And there'll be multiple horses that continue to shape us and change us. And I think what separates the horse people from something else is that, in my opinion, the horse people allow the horses to lead them somewhere as much as they lead the horse somewhere. So, so after that experience in Southern California, what happened next in your life?
Well, let's see. So,
not Southern California, Southern Arizona.
Yeah. Southern
Arizona. What happened next?
Okay, let me think. Oh, right. Yes. So that was the transition. Judo provided the transition from dressage competitor to going into Parelli. That was the juncture there in like the 2004, 2005, where
right during like the peak of that like surge into Parelli land. Like that was when it was really starting to take off at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you rode that wave at its peak.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yep. From the build through, like, got off before the huge downfall. I went, that's an iceberg. I can see that iceberg. I'm going to grab my escape chute here.
Yeah, I don't want to lead you into a conversation where you implicate yourself in any kind of awkward manner, but how much of that Parelli journey do you feel comfortable speaking about here on the record? Tell us about what that was like.
The overwhelming majority is very positive. So just throw that out there because of the same thread. Like the reason I got involved was really going from the contrast of the Arabian show world to the supportive dressage community that I knew. And coming from a background of knowing the community is really important, that was a big part of the Parelli experience. People were getting together at clinics, right? So educational venues were the shows, right? That was the thing to do, was to get together and learn together, and to get together and say, I don't know what to do. Oh, here's this weird way that we wiggle ropes and our life is better. Yay! So that anytime that
people
that you can have something that kind of shakes you up and shows you that there's something different and maybe it's better. That's a pretty intoxicating thing. And you see all these other people. But so there was an overwhelming feel of people were drawn to doing something with their horses where the goal was to enjoy it, or the goal was to build communication, not to go and show off what you had achieved. That's how it started. That's how it felt. That's how it started. That's how it felt at that point. And that signed me up for that. Right? So there's also, coming from, one of the things I loved about dressage is that there's a systematic progression. And you talk about the ideals, but you don't ever think you're going to reach them, right? They're sort of there, but it's not really that you failed if you don't reach that goal of perfection. We're just playing with those ideas. And that was kind of present back in those days for me with the Parelli thing. And
something universal, another universal thread, that a progressive system where there are ideals, but no one shame spirals if they don't reach or present the ideals. We're just here exploring the principles and the practices and enjoying the process.
Absolutely. And it was still very much like Pat and Linda at that point were seeing some big blooms of success, and still really in the mode of talking about the relationship with the core horses that they had at that point, which, Linda had Bremer and Pat had Casper and Magic. And there was a lot of emotional attachment that they had to those horses and those horses' stories, and that they were bringing forth. There was a lot of that connection element that was present for everybody, being kind of drawn in at that point. And it was talked about sort of, there's a hierarchical structure of levels that Parelli is based on. And at that point, the thought was, there's 10 levels, but we haven't defined the top 5. So it felt so similar in that regard. And there were plenty of things that in those early days that I was not necessarily perfectly aligned with, but I was happy enough to go along with learning where it kind of went, right?
Okay, so which parts of that weren't you aligned with, and which were? You've explained the community, you've explained the progressive training, you explained that Pat and Linda were leading from a place of the animal story, my connection to that animal, and this is from where I lead, which is that integrity. My hat off to them. But which were the parts and pieces that you were like, I don't know, but I'm gonna give them benefit of the doubt?
Yeah. So at that point, it would have been more like specific tasks. So in the upper level, one of the things that I can't remember, it might have been. Yeah. Okay. So I've been there from when level 1, right? So for those who don't know, that Parelli is set up in a level system that's level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when I started, level 1 involved everything from trailer loading to riding bareback with a halter and a string on one rein and doing a figure 8, trotting, tossing the string around, having what's called a controlled catastrophe, where you're riding with one rein and someone does something that could spook your horse and you'd show how you deal with that. It started at that point of essentially...
Let's take a break. There are so many options for learning these days. How to differentiate one from another? I'd like to take a moment just to differentiate emotional horsemanship for you. Emotional horsemanship is horsemanship that prioritizes how your horse feels before it prioritizes what your horse does. We can blend in various reinforcement modalities here, and we can blend in riding or non-riding, or even spiritual and energetic work if that's what you prefer. We have a series of sometimes proprietary techniques and sometimes universal techniques that we have filtered through science, empathy, and feel that can equip an everyday, deeply caring horse owner with the skills they need to communicate with their horse calmly, quietly, and safely. I am committed to defending your ability to train your horse simply, effectively, and softly, and to have that seen as legitimate. If you'd like to take that legitimate first step, I'd like to invite you to explore the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. This course is a prerequisite to working with me privately and to accessing my other programs. It is priced as accessibly as I can, and also giving you lifetime access plus self-study means that you can take your time to work through the material there and really digest it. I'd like to invite you to join me there, and I should also mention that this year, 2024, at the time of this recording, the entire course is getting a total refilm and upgrade. All existing students will get access to that, but so will future students. But this is the time to access this content now so that you can start building practices with your horse that don't perpetuate cycles of trauma and practices that you can really feel at home in, finally, after all your learning journeys. Thank you for taking this moment with me to allow me to extend an invitation to you to join me in study. And now let's return to this conversation with my friend and colleague, Michelle Knapp.
One does something that could spook your horse and you'd show how you deal with that. It started at that point of essentially geared towards people who were already handy ranch hands.
That was level one.
Yep.
Level one at that time when Parelli was attracting a different type of person who was probably already professional or semi-professional in their own right. And then Parelli changed because the industry was changing at that time.
They were very good at noticing what was happening and going, and I'm not sure, it might have been Linda at that point who noticed that. Can't remember. But essentially, they started to shift. So that original level one, that was in the 1990s. Those were the sheets of paper, and it was a whole different deal. And level two, we're doing flying changes out in the field with the reins over your thumbs, essentially. So then that went all the way back. Yeah,
that was level two.
Yeah. So a lot of people did not. This will shock you, did not progress through the levels very fast.
No. Yeah. Because that's kind of like a lifetime achievement award for some people.
And some people should not
be doing lead changes bareback. Yeah.
It's okay.
Right? It's all right. Yeah.
They pulled way back and went, we're accessing this part of the horse industry, right? This teensy little tunnel. What do we do? And they went back to eventually later in the 2000s, where level one was, here's how you approach your horse in a field and prepare to halter. Here is how you put a halter on.
Nice one.
How we lead, from point A to point B. So
I call that de-escalation, as you well know.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was there as an advanced student headed towards becoming an instructor in that point where there was honestly a lot of de-escalation present. And what they referred to as the blue box level two, where Linda came out with Dr. Stephanie Burns, who introduced the concept of move closer, stay longer. So they started to bring in the comfort zone and realize that, oh my God, a lot of people are actually not very confident around horses. Or wait, causing them to canter at speed across an open field and jump barrels is making them worried? Hold on a second. That's common? Yeah, no thanks. Pushing me over my threshold. So there were lots of discussions about fear and loss of confidence that weren't common out in the rest of the horse industry. So it was a very touchy-feely time, which also started to create a little bit of internal division, amongst Parelli instructors. But it was fascinating because they're really, yes, it's a system that is built on escalating pressure, but also a lot of that came from efforts to delineate ways to teach people. I don't use those same ways anymore, but I have done a lot of, this will surprise you, thinking about why these things were set up, and again, being positioned to watch from the late 90s a little bit, but really from like 2006 or so through 2016, I was pretty involved. Well, through 2014, I was pretty involved with seeing those changes and watching them respond to the industry and crumble.
The crumbling of it, yeah. I mean, I've said this in many different ways, and I think it's a good time for me to say this again. I'm so thankful, grateful, and humble towards Pat Parelli and Monty Roberts for the ground that they broke in coming from similar places and then moving out in different directions. You know, Monty, he got the approval of the Queen, and that sort of took him into Europe quite well. And Pat really conquered North America, and then he went global. And I guess if you're thinking about some of the most brutal, sticky corners of the horse world, so somewhere on a station in Australia right now, there will be a blindfolded horse getting sacked out with its legs tied up until it turns over and gives up. That still happens. I know that still happens because I currently have clients on my books who have those horses that they rescued out of those scenarios where they saw that happen as of 18 months ago. So these things still happen in certain corners of the world. Imagine someone who's come from that environment wanders into a Parelli meeting and they see escalating pressure, which they know what escalating pressure is, but they see it done way, way quieter. And they go, oh, when you're still able to achieve X, Y, Z and achieve a horse that's still, like, from my agricultural eyes, usable for me. Oh, okay. And I can do that without completely terrorizing and potentially brutalizing the horse. Great. And then, you know, Parelli sort of gained credibility amongst the recreational sort of and adult beginner market as well, because it had a systematic approach. They understood that they had to teach basics. And they laid a lot of ground. But I remember probably about 6 years ago, I was in Poland, someone came up to me at a barn and they were watching someone else having a Parelli lesson. And this Parelli lesson was being done by a trainer in Poland who lives in Poland. She is a Parelli something level instructor. And she learned from someone else who was a Parelli something instructor. And that instructor learned from another instructor who learned from Pat. And yeah, they've all like shook Pat's hand and gone to Florida and spent a summer, but no one was learning directly from him. And someone turned to me and said, Lockie, what do you think of Parelli? Because they were watching this lesson and it was a little bit rough to watch. It was like choppy waters. You know, like they were working on stuff, but it was just like choppy waters, right? There was nowhere for my eye to rest. It was like a busy painting, you know, to watch. And I said to them, I don't have an opinion about Pat Parelli because what I'm seeing over there, here, many, many years and many Chinese whispers of instructors filtered down into this instructor's interpretation for this student and then this student's private practice, which is an interpretation of, I think, am I even looking at something that Pat would co-sign? Am I even looking at something that still has the integrity of original intent behind the system? I'm not sure I am. I'm not sure I am. And when something gets so big, integrity becomes a concern.
Absolutely.
Do you think that was part of the crumbling of the system? Because it has kind of crumbled in its own way and moved on into different things.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a point back in probably 2006, now I can't remember, 2006, where a part of Europe broke off from the Parelli. They'd essentially kind of done like a franchise, and then that became equine ethology. And it was always kind of a discussion around Parelli about what's pure Parelli and how do you control that? Should you control that? And yeah, I think it's interesting because to some extent, I think that was a little bit of the downfall of the organization. Now, the organization still continues. It's still there. There's still some great people there. But
Pat and Linda have divorced.
Yeah.
Their huge Colorado compound has been sold. I think has it been sold or it's up for sale?
Is it? Yeah. It looks like they're going to be doing courses there again.
They're going to hold on. So he's dug his heels in somehow.
I don't know. I don't have to know now. But
didn't he file for bankruptcy? That's what I heard.
It looked like it was going to be auctioned, and then something happened, and the auction.
Investor stepped in, perhaps. Who knows? Who knows?
I really don't. But it was always going to be problematic when you have something that is named after a person, right? Pat's method. And Pat is a mortal human. He has a finite lifespan. And there were points at which there were different people who were kind of...
See, I thought he came from the planet Klingon and was an immortal, a god of the... Yeah, anyway.
Right. On. So that's a tricky thing, right? Because you have to have... If you want continuity of the concept in the program, you have to let go of some of the control. But when you let go of some of the control and that decision leads to a really bad place, which happened, then you go, oh, see, I knew that was never going to work and I better take control back. And then, well, you're still mortal and it's still finite. So it was always going to kind of be, the growth of the program is going to be a little bit constrained by, things have to grow, right? They have to grow and change. And I agree. I am eternally thankful for the time I had and the experiences I had within that community and learning from Pat and Linda and the greater community. That was always my draw, was the greater community. And, but you have to grow out of it. And I think they really did revolutionize the horse industry because so many of us would not, Liberty wouldn't be a household name without Pat. It wouldn't. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have all of this stuff going on. But I don't know that you get two of those per lifetime. Right? They were chasing being able to revolutionize the horse industry again.
And you don't get two dead.
I don't think so. I don't think so. So it was
wow.
It was interesting. But I figured there was a point at which I had been going to leading up to this point of saying there's always cost benefit. And when the cons outweigh the pros, I'm going to step out.
Okay, and you did.
To the point that I'm pretty good at looking at the framework of what I'm doing with horses and being able to fit it into another framework. So I could say, okay, I'm not teaching people the same phases anymore. I'm teaching people to de-escalate rather than escalate. But I can fit that in the framework of the friendly game, and here's how. And it got to the point that I went, yeah, but I really can't say that I would start people. If I get a new person, I'm not going to start them the way that Parelli is recommending now. I'm not going directly to the 7 games way. So I went, okay, I'm no longer standing in integrity here. I need to say thanks, and I wrote a really nice email to Pat and Linda and said, thank you so much. I really appreciated this. I'm just, our paths are diverging.
So for people who don't know, you were that close into the industry, becoming an instructor, integrating with them. So much so that when you stepped back, it was a situation where Michelle's sitting down, writing to them personally about you stepping back.
Yeah. I spent 4 different 3-month periods in the externship, internship, etc. I was a fully accredited 3-star instructor for a few years. So yep.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so trickle down effect. I know you spent a stint, hauling your horses across America, doing clinics and stuff.
Oh yeah.
You did all that. And now, when did you land in Wisconsin and why?
Oh, yeah, it's another good question. So I was living in Minnesota at the time, and I was about to start working for a Parelli instructor named Farrah Green. And we found out about this place over here in Madison that some people were starting. That's called the Horse First Farm, still in existence, very cool place. But so that was going to be, the thought was giant track system, boarding, Parelli-based barn.
Wow.
Multiple instructors, community, all the right things. And I was like, yes, let's go talk to them. So that idea drew me to the Madison area. And I kind of went, hi, I'm going to park in your parking lot with my trailer. And I lived in my horse trailer in the Horse First parking lot for, I don't know, a few months. And said, I'm just here now. This this is where I'm going to live, and I want to be a part of this kind of growing community thing. And so being attached to the Horse First is where I started my whole Parelli instructor journey and did that while boarding there and working there. So that's what drew me to Wisconsin. And then I realized, I don't actually want to leave Wisconsin and go back to Arizona because
it's hot. It's hot out in Arizona.
Water comes from the sky.
It's hot.
Yeah.
What is kind of important? Like, we kind of need water to like have hay and live.
It's really true. And I love the desert. I love Arizona. And I never knew what an abscess was growing up because feet that are hard don't get abscesses.
Right.
But when I was born in Tucson, there were 250,000 people. And it is currently, that area is roughly 2 million now.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's hard out. No water, 2 million. Yeah, bye.
It's just,
Thanks.
So,
gone.
So I stayed in Wisconsin. And then I had...
Got your farm.
Yep, had to look for a farm for Connor. So Connor...
because horses are the original pyramid scheme. They're the original MIM. You get one, and then you're buying in, and then it's the trailer, and then you need the farm, and then you need the machine, and then it never ends.
Yeah,
it never ends.
Pretty much.
I'm in that escalation phase myself right now. I got Sunny, and now I've got Sunny his farm, and he's got his whole setup, and he's like, now I'm going to have cancer, so you're going to deal with that. So that's... I so get that. So your darling Connor led you to throw down some roots. Are you thinking of sticking around in Wisconsin at that farm for a while?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've been here 5 years and we're just barely getting
scratched the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'm really, really looking forward to being your first clinician at your farm We're gonna go blink, sneeze, and I'll be there, like at your house, saying hi. We're doing this thing. Remember, it's gonna be right around the corner. So, I'm so looking forward to doing that. And thank you for inviting me to run a clinic at your place. How did you? For those who don't know, you and I know, but how did you find me? How did we find each other?
Oh, good, because this gives me an opportunity to mention my dear friend, our dear mutual friend. So through Courtney Trares of Full Circle Fun in Michigan. So we were Parelli instructors together. We met and forged a bond through the Parelli instructor time. And then as we've both been moving out and exploring different ways to be with horse, she brings a lot of outside clinicians to her farm, or more than one, which is more than me. And she had said, I've been watching this guy on Instagram in Spain, and he's pretty interesting. So I'm going to bring him to my farm. And, okay, that's kind of weird. And so I looked you up then and watched, I think, a little 10-minute promo that you had from your last clinic tour. I was watching, going, that's kind of, Oh, I kind of like that. Oh, that's it. Oh, and I realized I'd watched 10 minutes of a video of your past clinics, and there was nothing in it that caused me to kind of brace or go, but
recoil.
Yeah. And I went, okay, I'm totally interested. So I called up Courtney. I was like, hey, do you mind if I come sleep on your couch for that clinic? And she was like, cool, yeah, absolutely. So that was how I learned who you were, and then just showed up for being an auditor for that clinic. And oh man, I was so nervous because something didn't work with the registration process. I can't remember. There was like a little blip that happened, and I was like, oh, he's going to think I'm an idiot because I don't even know how to use technology. And then I met you at Courtney's and you gave me a hug. I'm like, oh, hi, yeah, you're a colleague. You train horses and people. And I was like, what? Okay, I wasn't prepared for that kind of kindness already.
Someone being friendly as a general rule. Wow. Yeah.
So
it's a thing.
That was that. So at Courtney's clinic at Holly, Michigan last year. So that was how I...
And we had these amazing, probably my favorite part about that clinic last year at Courtney's place was the lunch break, but mostly at the end of the clinic. Yourself, Courtney, and I would sit down at her dinner table, in her kitchen table, and we'd just be having dinner, drinking a little wine. I mean, I wasn't, because I was waiting until the clinic was over to have a drink, but we just started talking and just shooting the shit. And then it was these long conversations, like 6 hours or more. And it was just, we were just unpacking everything that had brought us to this point. I'm sitting there just like rapidly taking cliff notes in my brain, trying to learn from both of you. And it was wild. I mean, she's someone I need to get onto the pod as well. But she's currently a dog mum as well and running a very, very busy program. So I just wanted to give her some space. But she's someone I also need to have on the pod, because she is in her community creating very clear safe spaces for people who typically haven't had safe spaces in this industry. And that's the Lord's work, in my opinion. Absolutely. And she's a very fine horsewoman and a very fine rider as well. So, someone I respect tremendously. Yeah. We're all kind of sticking together, aren't we?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, those conversations, that was such a helpful, like, you mentioned me kind of hiding under the rock in Wisconsin. And those conversations were such a helpful, like, chiseling a little bit of the rock open. Go, oh yeah, there might be more people out here who are
like
exploring these concepts and don't need definitive answers to everything. Right. So that was a huge part for me, because I love being able to, that's one of the big changes in my horsemanship over the years is I want us to become comfortable. I feel being led by the horses through that, to live in the questions and explore possibilities, but not get stuck in, well, here's my
result.
Yeah. Prescribed program of step 1, 2, 3, and I can fix this extreme situation in 10 minutes and give you all the steps to where you can do that at home in 35 seconds.
That is a stepping stone, but it's not an ending place. We need to be taking the next steps as a community. So this is maybe a wacky question, but you were at my clinic, and at my clinic, it became very, very clear your competency and your compassion. That became very, very clear. So when someone in the clinic needed someone to stay with them through something, I would say, Michelle, come. And I put you to work at the clinic, and you did. And I knew, she's got this. Okay, great. So then I could continue stewarding the whole clinic forwards, right? Because no one comes to
that did blow my mind a little, by the way. Just
well, that's just how I roll. But also, like, no one comes to an emotional horsemanship clinic because everything's going great with their horses. So there are a lot of people there who had like big needs, right? And it's not my job to have, I don't do private lessons at clinics, right? So it was sort of a group environment. So there were people there who couldn't implement something very, very simple with their horse without someone standing with them and holding their hand. And so you stepped up to do that for people, which was amazing. And then when I did my first group coaching program last year, you joined that, and you rose as a leader. Of course you did, within that program. And now you're still showing up, because we have I'm growing my own little community, such as it is. Hopefully that has nothing to do with my personality, but more to do with a system that can fly beyond me, which is what I'm really hoping to create. And there's a group that meet at this moment in time every Monday for free, who are like alumni students of Lockie and Emotional Horsemanship. And it's just like, you guys get together and you're there. Can I tell you, I sleep well at night knowing that you're on those calls.
Oh, thank you. That's
I really do, because I know that we need leaders, and I can trust where you will take and where you won't take conversations and dialogue and discourse. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. That warms my heart to know. But I mean, I don't feel that. I love those calls. Let me say, I loved the entire being a student in the homecoming program. For those of you listening on this podcast, if you are at all interested in horses, please go and sign up, get on the homecoming program on Udemy, or the next time that Lockie offers it live. There were those of us that were professionals, and there were people in the course who are first-time horse people, the whole spectrum. There are just layers upon layers of important, really helpful insights and information in that. I recommend it to everybody. But
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you put so much into that, and it really shows. There's benefit for every level in that course. And I'm so excited to see where you're going to take it.
Well, it's not just where I'm going to take it, but where we as a group are all going to take this as a group. That's what is really, getting my rocks off. But like, if you had to describe emotional horsemanship and what I'm trying to teach and the difference I'm trying to offer people, if you had to describe that to someone who's not necessarily a horse person, but someone who's just uninitiated to what I'm doing, how might you describe that? I'm asking for a friend. Meanwhile, let me get my notepad out.
Yeah. Just wondering, how would you describe my life's work to someone else?
Yeah. Go ahead. Try. Give it a go.
No, sure. Yeah. Well,
give it a go.
It's a good question. I have described it to people, but they've been horse people. So I'm trying to think if I would. I guess some of the things that I would say is it's based on. I'm trying to think, because I feel like I had an eloquent answer for this, which is not now. But I have had an eloquent answer to a very similar question. So using your language about science and empathy and feel, because I think that's a helpful, you spent a lot of time coming up with those three terms. So that it involves that and is based around respecting horse and human needs and understanding the neurobiology of them, and that you're going to hate that I say this, but one of the big important parts is that you bring such an integrity and care that feels so free of ego that it really opens up for a sense of community into something bigger. So I think that's a big part. I mean, I know not about my personality, but really, it's kind of a part of it, because I feel like you just have such an integrity about what you're offering. And I think there's so many of us, again, being able to spend so much time with the people through homecoming, I feel like I don't want to talk for them, but there's a thread that you just show up so authentically. And that doesn't mean that you are just soft and permissive to everything. You're very good at showing people how a boundary is necessary and helpful and creates a safe space. And that people really, that's what allows people and horses to flourish. But it has to have the felt sense of care behind it, or it's just talking. So if I'm explaining it, I'm always throwing that in there.
No, the point is not for you to answer the question correctly. The point is to hear more about you. That's kind of the point. And how I am with people is how I am with horses. I can't be different with it. And what I've discovered is that there's more important things than surface. There is more important things than what it looks like. There are more important things than what the horse does. There are more important things than how they do what they're doing. There are more important things than what clothes we wear and what culture we identify with and the words that we use and the stories that we tell. What I'm really trying to illuminate is the rich inner world of the horse. And that's been done by people smarter than me in the past, but they have made it something about spirituality and feathers and sage sticks, which I've got some crystals behind me on my shelf. I'm no stranger to that. But at the same time, I think that's a turn off to the people who need it the most sometimes. So what I'm looking to do is try and bridge a gap between art and science, trying to bridge a gap between horsemanship, and equine therapy, for example, trying to bridge a gap between the private horse owner and the professional colt starter. Where is the common ground? The common ground is that we need to care deeply about the horse in everything that we do, and how they feel about what they do is the most important thing in everything they do or not, because sometimes the horses won't give you results, but they should and can be deep satisfaction, rapport, and affection shared between the human and the horse. That's why we get into it in the first place. And if you've got the right animal who's healthy and you put the time and the effort into, you can take that rapport and build it into a beautiful performance relationship as well. But I've seen too many horse people who, when shit hit the fan with the horse's health or age, that animal is now functionally useless to them. And so I think we're all kind of missed the point.
Yeah.
We've all kind of missed the point. And I think many horse training modalities at some point miss the point. And I'm trying not to miss the point. And I'm going to need a lot of people by my side to help me do that. And also have a system of training which gives people mechanical skills without them getting fixated on the mechanical skills. I mean, that might be an impossible task.
I know,
but I'm giving it a good go.
Yeah.
Giving it a good go.
What we've got. It's what we've got. And you know, it's so much about planting seeds. So much about planting seeds. And I think it's absolutely possible. It's just, it's not in our conditioned first nature.
That's what I'm trying to address, the conditioned first nature of the horse person, and trying to analyze that.
Yeah. But that's why it's so helpful to have the horses to model after. Okay. Right. Because they can help it become second nature for us. Right? Getting into that flow that isn't obsessed with the monkey mind, the story that we're telling ourselves. Be present, be with me, be here. Right? It is our second.
Lovely. All right, we're going to start wrapping it up with 3 little segments or questions. First one is, what the muck? What the muck? I'm going to invite you, Michelle, now to muck out with me. Muck out something from the industry that you think we don't need to have that hanging around. It stinks. Muck it out.
I don't even know. We kind of...
There's a lot, but pick one thing. Pick one thing today that you want to muck out.
Oh, man. It's so hard to think of that now since we've gone such a... Let's see. I should have done my homework. I didn't know. You were going to actually the questions then if we covered them. So let's go with nose bands. Why do we still need nose bands?
You know what I find really funny about nose bands? Is people will tie a horse's mouth shut with not 1, but 2, sometimes 3 or 4 nose bands, and then tell stories about communication. And I'm like, curious. Like there's a therapist somewhere reclining on their sofa, writing furiously on a notepad about that. It's just that there's something. I know horses don't necessarily speak language with their mouths, but we do, and there's plenty of anthropomorphism everywhere. Tying an animal's mouth shut and then telling stories about, look at the communication between the two of them, and the horse's mouth is tied shut. I don't know about you, but there's symbolism in that it's kind of like writing on the wall. And you know what happens is when we speak to the writing on the wall, you're the problem for speaking to it, because we've all kind of silently handshaked with each other and said, oh, there's this painfully obvious irony present, and we've all agreed not to address it. It is the most white middle-class thing I've ever heard in my life. Just like sweep it under the rug. Don't talk about it.
No, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one because, well, you're talking about the dress and the costume of, like, if we're talking about dressage, right? That is part and parcel of what we wear and how we look. We can maybe talk about, well, if you have a crank nose band on, you should be able to maybe fit your pinky underneath it. But again, I think the change comes from the pressure from all of the grassroots people. Like any of these things, where the more that people start taking away the social license for it, because we can talk about all sorts of things like, if you're talking about accoutrements like spurs and whips and, really obvious ones, but just for the exact reasons you were saying, I think the noseband is fascinating because it does, right? Like metaphorically, we're clamping the voice of the horse away. No, you don't know. I think they need to have some serious realizations about that. I know
they won't. They really. I don't think they will, Michelle. Like, I don't think they will. I think it's what we really need to be doing is just people who have a different point of view, just to model that different point of view and walk that talk. That's all we can do. Because I am not relying on the people who invented nosebands and who use them daily. I am not relying on them. If it is part of a costume, I'm not relying on them to walk away from that and just speak frankly about it. I'm not. We can't.
And here's the thing:
can't.
Sometimes you will encounter horses who are comfortable in them. Right? Oh, yes, sure, but this is fine. And we go, oh, yeah, see, that horse is fine with it, though. So probably all horses are fine with it, right? Because of this one little tiny example. Nuts.
It's amazing what horses can become comfortable with, particularly when they're around a certain energetic frequency that says, shut up.
Yeah.
Such as a noseband would be an energetic frequency that kind of maybe, I'm just guessing, wild guess, maybe the noseband kind of says, be quiet. So how comfortable are they when they don't have the ability to express that discomfort? I mean, I'm speaking to the choir here, but I'm just planting that seed. I would agree with you. Muck out nosebands. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Why not?
While we're talking about tack, how about tight girths?
Yeah, tight girths. Or like one-sided elastic girths. Get in the bin, straight away. Non-anatomical girths that put pressure on the sternum. In the bin, a lot of them.
But also just the fact that people habitually over-tighten. People habitually over-tighten because they feel like that's what's going to keep them safe. That's what's going to keep them balanced. Of course, is the tight girth.
Yes, we can also use breastplates, though I've had people attack me for using breastplates as well. Would you believe it?
Oh, shocker. Back, no. People are very kind at something.
People are very kind. Yes, generally. Aren't people, as a general rule, the kindest creature on the planet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next question / segment is tides of change. So you and I both agree there's another tide of change occurring in the equestrian industry. I'm going to allow you to answer this one of two ways. How would you define the tide of change? What is that? What is the actual change? Or how are you contributing to it? Maybe there's a connection there, but yeah, explore that with me.
Yeah, so to me, it really feels like the groundswell of the private or amateur horse owner who is, it feels like they are driving the change of it becoming acceptable to have a horse as a companion. Full stop. That is a growing segment of the population, or it's a part of the population that's gaining a growing voice. So there are, I think that is the driving force. Because you'll see with even like the homecoming program, you kind of were able to prick that big water balloon a little bit and give it a place to vent some
to go.
Yeah, and to flow.
Yeah.
And we're seeing people go, yeah, actually, this is what I want to do. I want to have my horses at home and I want to be able to communicate with them and enjoy them. And I want them to have a good life. And I want them to be able to tell me what they're feeling. And
right there. That's what emotional horsemanship is. You just described it. Remember the earlier question? Right there. That's what it is. That's actually what I'm doing. That's what I'm really trying to teach. And there's a lot of, it's amazing. It sounds so simple, but the amount of deconditioning required
so much
just to arrive there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's partly why I love being so involved in that group, because it's like, I'm drawn to it. Like, yes, this feels real. These are people, the real, not, I love talking about biomechanics. I'm a dressage judge too. I didn't even get into that story. I love talking about biomechanics. I love riding dynamics. But it gets so boring when it's like, I'm having a problem with my left lead. Cool. Because I know from decades that that's not usually the problem. It's
the problem, right. Right. At the root. The problem starts at the root. So why are we training the leaves?
Exactly. Yeah. And I got these gray hairs, so I have much less tolerance now for the surface stuff.
Got it.
I want to know.
Holy fuck. If I'm like this and my hair, I don't have a gray hair yet and I have zero what am I? I'm going to be the crankiest old man you've ever seen. Yeah. It's not looking good for me. Holy shit.
It's not all, it's crank and care. It's Fallon.
Cranky care. Yeah, crank. Yeah. Okay, that's my next program. It's called Crank and Care. That's my next LLC. That's gonna. Let me go register the domain name. Yeah. Okay.
That's just boundaries, right? Care.
Yeah, we'll call that boundaries. Crank and Care.
I hope I'm not that cranky. I'm just saying I have much less tolerance for surface.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited when people are willing to say, A,
go
it's
beyond
not
that.
all me. B, it's not all my horse.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to practice this yesterday on my Instagram. I got a message, and I'm trying not to, I'll say this with as much love and respect as I can. I got a message from some on Instagram last night. I say that with love and respect. And the message was a crying face in response to a video of my horse Sereno when I'm riding him and his mane, which looked pretty scruffy. He was at the end of like a 10-day braiding cycle. I needed to rebraid him because, I'm busy like making sure my horses are like turned out and like fed, that I haven't had time to like spend an hour and a half rebraiding his hair and brushing it out.
You bet.
And I thought, maybe I'll just like ride him gently on this day instead of rebraiding his hair for his well-being. Anyway, it was a crying face, and it said, his mane. Now, this person had followed him before he was with me when this horse lived in a very, very aesthetics-driven world. And I said, what's wrong with his mane? They said, it looked uncared for. And I said, okay, I'm inviting you to leave my social media. Just leave. Just leave. There's nothing for you here.
Yeah.
Nothing. There is nothing for you here. If that's what your priorities are, we have no basis to go forwards together. Please stop following me.
Yeah.
Please stop following me. Like if someone was following me in the supermarket, pointing at the shit stain on the bottom of my trousers because I've mucked out that day, saying that, and I'd say, please stop following me.
Oh, there you go. Mm-hmm.
So anyway. All right, last question for today, Michelle Knapp, is I'd like you to take me home. What is home for you with horses? What does that mean to you?
So, it is not shockingly very much like emotional horsemanship.
Oh, wow.
Yes, isn't that odd? I get so excited because that being with horses in a way that honors their input and in a way that can help validate intuitive information for the human.
Right there. That's also what I do. Let me write that down. I'm going to write that down.
Samesies.
I'm often the last person to know what I do. So thank you. I'm going to write that down.
I totally, embody that comment as well. Ask. you and Courtney. What am I doing? Who am I? What is this?
Embody embody, validate intuitive information for the person. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
As a horse person in training, whatever that training looks like. For some people, it looks like leg handling. For some people, it's looking like free riding, you know?
Getting, helping set an environment where people can trust the information that they're receiving, to trust their own body and their own information. Because when our body isn't receiving information and giving it to our brain, and we have, how on earth can we communicate clearly to a horse? How on earth can we communicate clearly from a horse? Or receive communication, right? So, yeah. So home for me is very much this, I think you called it joyful tinkering.
Lately. Yeah.
For playing with horses. And one of my distillations of my horsemanship mantra that I've had for the last just maybe 5 years is I want to have a goal in mind, but let go of the need for an immediate outcome.
Beautiful.
Because if you don't have a goal in mind, you're probably not going to get off the couch and do it.
Right.
And that goal, like you're saying, that could be handling feet, could be riding bridleless, it could be all sorts of things. But have something, but in the moment, let go of the need for that immediate outcome to happen. So
yes.
Yeah.
Michelle Knapp, thank you so much. I'm going to leave in the show notes where everyone can find you.
Wonderful.
And I'm so grateful to know you. And well, I won't say too much here, but I'm really hoping that we can begin like long-term collaborative efforts, put our shoulders to the yoke together. So, ready to link up. I'm ready to link arms with you, Michelle Knapp.
Let's do it.
Thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and that was my guest, Michelle Knapp. Wasn't she wonderful? I'm now proud to announce that since recording this episode, Michelle and I have shaken hands and agreed that she will be onboarded within Emotional Horsemanship as a trainer, coach. She will be contributing towards the methodologies, and she'll be assisting me in training and coaching my influx of clients. So, if you'd like to work with Michelle within Emotional Horsemanship, you can, and you can book her right now at emotionalhorsemanship.com. Thank you for being here. Please take care of yourselves, be kind to your horses, and I'll see you next time.